Before we start learning how to create web graphics, it's really important to understand the difference between pixel dimensions and resolution. Many times people refer to web graphics as being 72 ppi, or 72 pixels per inch. However, the reality is that's not always the case. You see, many of today's monitors are a much higher resolution, like maybe about 120 or 140 pixels per inch. And if you look beyond just the computer screen, handheld mobile devices like phones, for example, those can have even higher resolutions. In fact, the iPhone 4 has a resolution of over 300 pixels per inch. The reality is that a real web designer doesn't care about pixels per inch at all. In fact, the whole 72 ppi thing probably started because the original Macintosh had that resolution on its monitor. But to a web designer today, what matters most is the actual pixel dimension, meaning how many pixels wide and how many pixels tall. For example, if you look at your monitor, it's probably set to a certain resolution, things like 1024 by 768 or 1440 by 900. We don't really care about the size of the pixels as much as we do as the number of pixels. Take this example that I have right here. As you can see, I've created 3 rectangles in this document called resolutions.ai. And the 3 different rectangles represent different pixel dimensions for standard monitor sizes. We have 1024 by 768, 1440 by 900, and 1600 by 1200. Now, let's say we're creating some kind of a standard ad banner. So I'll select my rectangle tool and create a rectangle here of 468 by 60, just a standard ad banner size for the web. Notice now if I go ahead and position this right about here on the screen, you can see how much space this ad banner takes up on a monitor set to 1024 by 768. However, that same ad banner would appear much smaller on a resolution of 1440 by 900 because look how much more space there is on my screen. And in fact, on an even higher resolution at 1600 by 1200, that ad banner appears minuscule. To get a better idea of this concept, I'm going to come over here to my Artboards panel, and I'm going to double-click where it says Monitors to switch to this artboard. Here, I have 2 laptop computers, and these are both the 15-inch model that Apple makes for their MacBook Pros, but the resolutions are actually set to different resolution settings on the monitors. For example, on this laptop right here, the monitor is set to 1024 by 768, whereas on this laptop here, the screen is set to a resolution of 1440 by 900. You can see that on the higher resolution monitor, the graphics appear smaller, but I can also see a lot more information. I could actually see more of my page at once than I would on the lower resolution one. In other words, if I have a very high resolution, I can see more content at once, but the content is a little bit smaller, whereas in a lower resolution, I can actually see larger images, but I can get less content on my screen at any one time, and I need to scroll more to see it. Now, as a designer, there are 2 main things that you're going to need to think about. If you're creating graphics to a specification that someone else has defined, for example, you're creating graphics for someone else's website, that can be an ad banner or some other graphics, for example, in those cases, you will be given the precise pixel dimensions that you'll need to use. However, if you're designing your own website, it's going to be up to you to decide which dimensions you want to use. Many web designers today assume that most people have at least a 1024 by 768 monitor, and so they generally design websites at a width of around 950 pixels in width. Of course, these are all decisions that you're going to have to make. But the first thing to realize is that the whole concept of 72 pixels per inch shouldn't factor into any of your decisions at all. The only thing that matters now is going to be the actual dimensions, or the number of pixels, in the artwork that you're going to be creating.